Hi, welcome to another exciting episode of the Andre The Beast Crayton Show. Today, we're going to talk about a podcast that's been basically blowing up. It's been blowing up for a while, but we're going to go into the creator, into the mind of the genius behind the particular podcast that I'm talking about. Don't worry about what you see behind them. We're going to talk about that backdrop in the whole 9 yards. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome to the Andre The Beast Crayton Show, the creator of Too Opinionated, Michael Wall. Michael, welcome to the show, big guy.
Hey, Andre, thank you so much. Yeah, happy to be here.
Great. You know what? Man, you've been talking off camera, and the first thing that came to my mind was I like the Incredible Hulk. I'm a Marvels fan, but I see all kind of things behind you. Before we get into that, tell the viewers a little bit about who you are before we get into all your creations.
Well, so I think probably the best place to start. So back in the 90s, I ran a couple of comic book stores. That's how I put myself through college. And we were talking, I went to Marshall University. So I had a store that was literally across the street from the campus. It was awesome. That since then, the Marshall has bought that property. So that property doesn't even exist anymore as far as commercial property. But that's how we got started. 1996, Marvel goes bankrupt. Right. And I was like, it's over. I got to get out, before.
Wait a minute, Mike. I didn't even know this. You said Marvel comic, Stan Lee?
Yeah. Marvel.
Bankrupt?
Stan Lee, who at the time I was pretty friendly with because I did a lot of conventions. And at that time, he used to do a lot of conventions. So I'd run into him quite a bit. Mm-hmm. But Marvel went bankrupt. That's when they sold everything off. So the whole reason that you've got Sony and Fox and some of these, making kind of Spider-Man movies that don't have Spider-Man in it. That's why, because they went bankrupt, sold that stuff off. Wow. So, of course, they came back stronger than ever, but I didn't know that at the time. All I knew is they were going out of business. I was like, it's over.
Okay. Yeah, that's crazy. I didn't know that.
So I got out. So eBay was just starting up. So I sold most of my inventory on eBay and got out. Well, I had a son a couple years after that, and I always regretted not hanging on to the store for him, just to share that nerdiness that I love.
Well, Mike, not even that, but now that I think about it, you had a comic book store. I grew up buying comic books, the Human Fly and Luke Cage versus such. You probably had some books that are right now probably was worth a lot of money.
Listen, if you name a book that was made in the 60s, I had it. So anybody you want to think of, especially Marvel wise, so Iron Man, the Hulk, the Avengers, Spider-Man, we had all those. X-Men, whatever you can. Yeah, Thor. We had all their first issues. It was a great time to own a comic store. Plus, it was in the 90s, which is when all the Star Wars movies came back. We got the prequels. Mm-hmm. So we had, all of that going on in the store too. I miss it. That was the best. But as my son grew up, we were looking for ways that we could connect and share those things that we loved together, since we didn't have the store experience. Okay. So 2014, we started a Facebook page called MeisterCon, and it was just a meme page, just a way to get out there. Right. And it kind of did well, grew a following and allowed us to kind of just share nerdy stuff. Mm-hmm. 2019 comes along. Brett, who's my son, Brett's a librarian during the day. So he said, what if we tried a podcast together? And I was like, yeah, let's do it. I was just happy to do something with him.
Right. Like, how many of your kids say, let's go do a podcast, Dad?
Do a podcast. We didn't know what we were doing. At that time, we were in a bedroom. We were using a cell phone and just holding a microphone up to a cell phone to talk to people. We had no clue what we were doing. But we were very honest about it. We just let people know, hey, We're trying to figure it out. You know,
Right.
if you want to stick with us, we'll get better as we go along.
Now, when was this? When did this first take
That
place?
was January 2019.
Wow. Okay.
So we just kept playing with it. You know, Zoom got popular not long after that, so we started doing video interviews, kind of
Right.
similar to what you're doing, and it just took off. You know, I
Right.
can't really explain it. You know, a lot of times people kind of catch something that they like and it does well, and you don't really know why. It just does. Now, I suspect it has more to do with our guest list
We're going to talk about that too.
than me, but hey, we'll take it regardless. You know, one thing that I brought with me from that comic book experience is I made a lot of contacts in the entertainment business because I worked so many conventions.
Right.
So when we started the podcast and decided we wanted to do interviews, I started there. I started reaching out to those old contacts and getting people for the show. And then, you know, eventually we started working with managers and publicists, agents,
Yeah.
and kind of develop those relationships. Now, the majority of our guests are sent to us, or they're requesting an interview. It's not us reaching out. Initially, you know, those first couple of years, it was us going and asking for interviews.
Isn't it funny how, you know, entrepreneurs don't understand it's not so much what you know, but it's really who you know. You basically
Oh yeah.
bloom best by keeping your contacts in check for something like this. And you had no idea this was going to even flourish the way it did.
Yeah. No, I had no clue. You know, the early on, I made I was a Star Trek fan. We talked about that.
Yeah.
Jennifer Nash, who was she was on the episode of The Next Generation called An Inner Light. She played Patrick Stewart's daughter in the episode. Okay. So she was casting for Manhunter in Pittsburgh, and I saw on Facebook that she was in Pittsburgh, and I just reached out. I said, hey, you know, I've got this Facebook page. We started a little podcast, you know, maybe we can help you promote. And she said, yes, you know, didn't answer me on Facebook, actually picked up the phone and called me.
What?
Like, yeah, picked up the phone and called me. And I'm like, yeah, we're in St. Albans, West Virginia, which is about a 3-hour drive from Pittsburgh.
Right.
So she said, well, you know, I asked her, I was like, would you like to be a guest on the show? I said, you'll be our first guest. And she's like, yeah, of course. She said, I'll just drive down, you know, from Pittsburgh. So, yeah. So
I bet you was like, oh my God.
Oh, I couldn't believe it. So she's driving from Pittsburgh. And then she says, I'm going to bring food. So I'll cook. Because, you know, in addition to being an actress and a casting director, she's a chef. So I was like, so she drives from Pittsburgh. She's never met us. Cooked us dinner, was a guest on the podcast. That's how we got started.
What did your son say? Did he even know who she was?
No, he didn't know. He didn't know. And the funnier part was when I called my wife and I'm like, hey, I've got this actress from the 80s that's going to come and have dinner with us. And she's like, what? You know, now I do that stuff all the time. And now she's used to it. So she didn't even blink. But then when we were starting, she was like, what are you talking about? But, you know, Jennifer and I became very good friends. We, we've produced some some podcast shows since then. And it's that start and kind of just developing that little relationship really helped us kind of develop the confidence to keep the show going. Because if we hadn't run into Jennifer, I'm not sure we'd have kept the show going, you know, for this. But we did. And now we're closing in on 800 episodes now.
How hard is it to do what you do? Because the podcast industry now has really taken off. We seen a big jump in it at first, right after the pandemic, but then we seen a lot of people fall off. How difficult is it to really create good content, to have that good chemistry with your co-host, in your situation, your son, and have that connect? Because the ideal is to really have informative topic and conversation. And when you're talking about too opinionated, that's a great topic. That's a great topic and a great lead for any podcast.
Yeah, it really is. It hasn't been like, I don't want to say it hasn't been difficult, but it hasn't been as difficult as you would think.
Mhm.
We've managed to build it pretty well, and I do think a lot of that has to do with the guest list. I mean, I like to say the best thing about podcasting, anybody can podcast.
Right.
The worst thing about podcasting is anybody can podcast.
Right.
There's 15 million and counting podcasts out there. So getting anybody to, getting your show to rise above the noise is just about impossible.
Right.
So and then once you do that, once you get some attention, then you have to hang on to it. Right. And that's difficult.
Right.
With that. So with us, we've kind of taken it as when we started, we took we're not going to tell anybody no. If somebody asks to be on the podcast, we're going to put them on there.
Right.
Now, since then, now it's gotten to the point that we can be a little more selective, and we try to do that. But initially, we just didn't tell anybody no. It didn't matter how big a star you were, what you had going on.
Mm-hmm.
For a author, a musician, actor, whatever it was, we'd take you and put you on the show just to, it gave us content. It allowed us to become experienced pretty quickly because we were doing so many interviews. Mm-hmm. And it worked for us. Now the quality of the guest has improved as the show has went along, but we've kind of taken the approach of just being very upfront and honest, and we try to have a positive conversation that highlights the guest.
Right.
We don't do gotcha stuff. I don't try to sneak up on anybody. If there's some negative stuff going on, if they don't want to talk about it, we don't talk about it. You know what I mean? You try to treat your guests respectfully, and then that word of mouth spreads and you get more guests.
When you say too opinionated, what is the premise of the show? Like, what do you guys, you and your son, really talk about when you having guests, and what kind of guests really makes your show, or should I say, when did you change the format to where, like you said, at first you was building the content, but now you got to really streamline it. So how did you wind up doing that, especially with a topic too opinionated?
Yeah. Well, so the initial idea with the show was you have two generations, father and son, mm-hmm. that should have different opinions, because we come from things, from different angles. Right. So that should lead to some pretty good discussion because we would have opposite or differing opinions. But the reality was we actually had a lot of the same opinions. So, really? and we discovered pretty early on, Brett doesn't like being on camera. He doesn't mind doing the audio only episodes where we're just talking about a subject, mm-hmm. Maybe we do a Madam Web episode, right. That's the new movie out. So he doesn't mind that, but he doesn't like being on camera. But he loves to do the editing, the marketing, the behind the scenes stuff. Right. Well, I discovered the opposite. Right. I didn't think I'd like being on camera, and I actually man, I don't mind this. Right. So we kind of, we kept the name Too Opinionated, but most of the time when I'm doing interviews, it's really about, we're just diving into that person's career. And they're welcome to promote something if they've got something going on right then. We're really diving into, what got them into the entertainment business, what's keeping them there, what they're working on. If they've done something that's done well, we'll talk about that. So the name doesn't necessarily fit the content that we're putting out there right now. But you know how that goes. Once you establish a name, you're like, that's the name. Right. Out of all the guests, you guys have been around for quite some time. You definitely homed in on your craft. I follow you guys. I look at your content. My hat's off to you, because I know the time and effort it takes to produce even one show to make it informative and engaging for individuals. You got some major celebrities on your show, and believe me, celebrities look at platforms to see if they want to be a part of it or so forth. Give me 3 celebrities that really have taking you to the point that you go, wow, this is really good, that just blew your mind, that they came on your show and they brought some really good informative content to your show? Well, we've been lucky. When the contacts I had were mostly actors that were popular when I was growing up.
Right.
So initially we had, Sam Jones that played Flash Gordon. We had Lonnie Anderson from WKRP.
I remember that. Yeah.
Mark Singer, who was the Beastmaster, and was on V. We had him, Ed Asner was on, we really hit a lot of the big stars from that era that maybe aren't as popular today, or they're not acting as much today. So they had, they got a little bit more free time. So we were able to get those on. As we went along, we were kind of transitioning more to more modern day, people that are doing things right now. So we're talking to people that are promoting things, and that opened some doors for us. Right. I was lucky enough, William Shatner came through Charleston with his one-man tour. Right. And, I submitted my stuff to be as a moderator for him, and I got that position. So last February, I got to have dinner with Bill, and then get up on stage with him, introduce him, and spend an evening just asking him questions, basically doing my podcast on a stage, that's filled with a couple thousand people.
Like, what do you ask somebody like him that's been in every single, even from Star Trek, you still see him in movies with Eddie Murphy and,
oh yeah,
his clock never stops.
No. And I'll tell you, I was getting tired because we wrapped up that interview, we're on stage, but it was almost midnight. And really? After the interview, he met with fans for a couple of hours, signing autographs and taking pictures and stuff. And then we're like 2:00 in the morning. He drove himself to Fort Wayne, Indiana for his next show. So
that's right up the street from here.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So he left at 2:00 in the morning, drove to Fort Wayne, which was, I think, about a 4-hour drive. So, I mean, he's in his 90s, but he's got as much energy as you would want.
What did you take away from that interview? What did you take away from it?
Well,
share anything with you with what you're doing?
Yeah, it's a couple things. So it helped to legitimize us, because we were, we took that as a way to promote the show, and that helped us quite a bit. It kind of showed me that there's nobody out there that we couldn't get as a guest. We just got to put the work in with that. So that was pretty nice. I'm an introvert at heart, so I get nervous, and especially if I'm in a situation where I'm not comfortable, or if I'm out in front of a crowd.
Mike, I don't believe that. I don't believe that one bit.
I know. Let me tell you this. I spent the majority of my life working, running call centers. I ran call centers for Ticketmaster, for DirecTV, for AT&T, and I never liked any of it. I just didn't enjoy it. But that's my degree was in management. After the comic book stores closed, that's what I went into. Wow. And I never enjoyed it. I dreaded meetings. I hated talking with bosses, any of that. I just struggled. So I was a little leery coming into the podcast because I'm like, I'm not sure how that's going to go. Right. But I got comfortable, once I got into it and kind of figured out, hey, you can do this. There's nothing. And then after William Shatner, I'm like, if I can be on stage with William Shatner and survive it, then there's nobody I can't talk to. So it helped me that way, if that makes sense.
What did William Shatner, did he even know the concept of a podcast? Because he's probably seen every type of entertainment.
Oh, yeah.
Field. Was he shocked with the podcast, or was he just like, what was his reaction to it?
Well, so he's very up to date on technology, especially for like if you went and saw my parents, they have no clue about technology. I'm their technical expert, which is a terrible position to be in. But now William Shatner, he was pretty up to date with that stuff. He was pretty aware of anything that's on his social media. He does most of his tweeting himself. He handles that. Now I'll tell you, when we were having dinner, it's just the two of us. We're backstage having dinner, and he didn't talk about himself much. He wanted to know about the podcast. He was asking about my family, how I grew up. Very personable.
Really?
As soon as he steps on stage, he's William Shatner.
Really?
It's a completely different persona. So he gets he's this presence on stage, but backstage, he's just a guy, if that makes sense.
Yeah. You share some other exciting things with me outside of the podcast.
Yeah.
You come from an area where legacy is deeply rooted. And let's talk about Marshall for a minute. When I think about Marshall, I think about the movie with
Of course. Matthew McConaughey.
I also think about the greatest wide receiver that I know, Randy Moss. I'm always going to say I'm a Randy Moss fan, period. And I'm a Chad Pennington fan. But you grew up in that area. Your store was across. What's it like in that area?
Being a Marshall graduate is pretty great. It's a great university. I've got to see through my life it expand. We got to see it go up to Division I in football. We were Division II when I was in school in 1990. We won the Division II championship, and then moved up to Division I. Randy Moss was a big part of that. A lot of the reason that they were able to make that move was because they were so successful. That success, a big part of it, came from Randy. And the great thing with Randy was, we followed him in high school, and he was on a high school team, basketball team, with Jason Williams.
Yeah, White Chocolate.
White Chocolate. Yeah. They played in the same backcourt together.
Really?
And the other person on that team was Bobby Howard, who went on to Notre Dame to play football, and then went to play pro football. So they basically had three pro athletes on that high school team. Pretty incredible. Yeah. So the question about Marshall, since the movie came out, everybody knows about the tragedy. It was awful. I remember it growing up when I was just a kid. I was born in 1969. Tragedy happened in the early 70s. It was devastating. And you don't go to Marshall University and not know, be aware of that presence of that tragedy. But the great thing about Marshall is they haven't let the tragedy define them. They've defined themselves by how they reacted to the tragedy.
Right.
And we know that story, because we've seen the movie. That the football team came back. They were stronger than ever. Yeah. And they built from there. I remember Stan Parrish was the head coach the first time they got to 500 as a team back in the 80s. I remember that, and they built that and built that and built that until they were national champions, and then they moved up to the higher division, and they've been fairly successful there.
Yeah. When you talk about too opinionated, what are some of the topics that have definitely been too opinionated? Because we have so much stuff going on in the world since podcasts has been evolving. We got tons of topics to talk about, some taboo, some need to be addressed. What are some of the things that you and your son, because you said this is you and your son, he likes to stay off camera, but what are at least three of the topics that you guys found very difficult to really understand from his viewpoint, from your viewpoint, and from your listeners' viewpoints? Give me three of them.
Yeah. So for us, we like to call ourselves a pop culture podcast.
Okay.
So, we try, even despite the too opinionated name, we keep it pretty positive. Okay. So, we try to focus more on, we may have arguments, but they're not going to be over super serious stuff a lot of the time. It may be over, was the Darth Vader from the original trilogy a bigger threat than the Darth Vader from the prequels? It's nonsense stuff, just nerdy stuff talking about. But now on the, when we have guests on, we don't really censor them at all. If they want to talk about something, we'll let them talk about it. And we just try not to give, we try not to overtalk them. We want to put the emphasis on the guest. So number one on that list that's going to cause conflict is politics. Once you hit politics, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what your personal opinion is. I guarantee that there's going to be conflict with anybody you talk to.
Right.
It's just the way it is. Politics kind of breeds that conflict. So that's the first one. The second one is, it's a little tougher to define, but we do a lot of interviews outside the country. So a lot of Canadian, a lot of European countries we'll talk to. Well, their political situation's different from ours,
right?
But can be very, can be a tough situation with that. So we will run into conversations, heavy conversations about political situations in other countries.
Right.
So I would put that one probably as number two. And then with Brett and I, one of the things that has worked out for us is that our views on how we should be running the episodes of the podcast,
right,
are different. So with Brett, he wants, like, if he had his druthers, he would take the episodes of me and him just talking about nerdy stuff. Those would be a podcast. The interviews would be a separate podcast.
Right.
With me, I'm like, it's just one podcast. You count all of them. You count those numbers up that way. But when we're on just two of us, we'll argue about that stuff all the time. And I'm very detail oriented, kind of a note taker. He's very off the cuff, kind of ad libs everything. That drives me crazy. So that's a conflict we'll come into, because I always think he's unprepared, and he's actually very well prepared. It's just different from mine.
When you talk about your son, I see the joy in your eye, even though you wasn't able to have the comic book store anymore. You actually have started something different. How does that make you feel, that you still somewhat keeping that dream alive with father and son, but totally on a whole different spectrum, to where you guys are both respecting each other's generation, so to speak?
Yeah, it's been great. It didn't matter to, it matters now, but when we started, it didn't matter to me whether we were successful or not. All I wanted to do was spend time with my son.
Right.
When now we're successful and I'm getting to spend time with him, and not, we get the father-son time. We get that quality time, but we also get to work with each other as adults. I get to see him actually doing things that are going to help him as he goes through his life. And so it's pretty great, because I can deal with him as a father and a son. I can also deal with him as a peer. And it's been pretty great. Plus, that's somebody I know I can rely on. With this podcast, it's just the two of us.
Right.
So we have to rely on each other pretty heavy. So if I ask him for something spur of the moment, I know he's going to come up with it for me, and vice versa.
Right.
And you need that. That you got to have people with you, or it's too much for one person.
Right. What kind of advice would you give young entrepreneurs that's trying to get into having a successful podcast? What would you recommend their steps be to be successful like you guys have done?
It's pretty simple. I mean, make sure that your sound quality is decent. You don't want to be putting out a product that somebody can't listen to. So you got to make sure that that's right. And then it's really just about consistency. Whatever you're podcasting on, even if it's just you by yourself talking, whatever it is, if you got guests, if there's two of you just talking about a subject, whatever it is, you have to be consistent about putting it out. You don't want people searching for your content.
Right.
And whatever it is, if you want to put out Mondays at 10 o'clock or Tuesdays at 9 or whatever it is, if you want to put out every day, that's fine too. But you got to get people used to seeing your content at a certain time. Now, we've been lucky because our other social media has a very large following outside of the podcast, and we use it and have used that as a way to promote the podcast. So it's really, thank goodness we did that 10 years ago, or I'm not sure we'd have done as well on the podcast. But our Facebook page reaches into the millions. So if you start sharing the podcast on that, it tends to get some viewers that way. So that's helped us out.
How can the viewers reach out to you, listen to your podcast? If you're looking for guests to come on to have interesting stories, that is, how can the viewers reach out to you guys or listen to your podcast?
Yeah. And we get a lot of that. We get, especially from, someone that's trying to promote something. They may be promoting their own thing, or they may be a publicist or an agent, manager or something for somebody else, and they'll contact us. Easy to do. We've got our website is MeisterCon, just one A, meistercon.com. And you can go there and send us an email from that, and we'll respond. I mean, if it's not me responding, it'll be Brett, but that'll get us that. And you can find us on any social media under MeisterCon. That'll lead you there. Our YouTube channel, which we show our videos, is MeisterCon Pod. That has all the videos. Or you can go to the website, and we've got the audio and video versions of the podcast. I think yesterday we put out episode 735, so we're fairly prolific. We put out normally about.
Wait a minute, what's that episode called?
735.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's been 5 years, and we've just kind of picked up steam. Well, I told you early on, we didn't tell anybody no, so we were doing a ton of episodes. We're a little more selective now because we're able to be, but we kind of like the volume approach, so we tend to put out about 4 a week. So yeah, there's plenty of content there. If you're a fan of a show or a movie or a person, there's a decent chance we've talked to them. So just check that out and you'll see. And then we're on IMDb, which is the entertainment database. So if you just wanted to go see like everybody that's been on the show or check us out, you can go to iamdb.com and look up the Two Opinionated podcast. It's right there.
Mike, you're definitely a beast, straight up. You and your son. I know the work that you guys put into creating such a great podcast, great episode, great content. Lead the viewers with that beast frame of mind that you and your son live with every day to be successful the way you guys are.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that earlier. Podcast takes time, probably more time than people think. And, so far, we haven't quite got to the point where podcasts are respected, just by and large, because there's so many of them and the majority of them aren't great. So that tends to, kind of bring that down. So for us, it's all about preparation with that. When we have a guest coming on the show, we'll spend a couple hours, going through their background, really researching them so that we're prepared. That doesn't necessarily mean we're going to ask questions about the stuff we researched. They may want to talk about something else.
Right.
But I like to be prepared. And also a little trick that I use is with actors. This is just a little, I've become friendly with a lot of actors. So I feel pretty confident saying this, but actors, if you have a group of actors, if you're sitting in the middle of a group of actors and you're talking to one person, all those other actors, they look like you've just, kicked their dog, because you're not paying any attention to them. Spotlight on another person. As soon as you turn your attention to one of them, they light up. So they're an actor. They like that. They like that attention. So my little trick is I always go and look for what either their earliest role is or their most obscure role. And I make sure that I've seen it. So then I can bring that up and I'll be like, I seen you in this role 23 years ago, this little tiny thing. And 9 times out of 10, they just light up because nobody ever asks them about that. And they love talking about something that they never get asked about. So that's a little trick for me. If you got a guest coming on, find a little tidbit about them that's probably a little obscure that nobody has asked for a while. And I guarantee that's a great way to break the ice, get them involved in the interview. That works for me. That's kind of how we get into beast mode.
Okay. ladies and gentlemen. Mike, thank you so much for being on the show. Love to have you guys come back, especially when you hit that 1,000 mark, that 1,000th episode. I like to see
it's coming.
1,000.
It's coming. Yeah. You need to come on because we've been chasing. Let me throw this out there before you go. We've been chasing Jennifer Garner for 5 years because she's from here.
Really?
She's right where we're podcasting. I haven't found her yet, but wouldn't she be a great 1,000th episode?
I'll see what I can do on my end.
Yeah, see what you can work out. You bring her with. We'll bring you with her.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, this has been another exciting episode. Make sure you guys subscribe, like, and share, and go to Too Opinionated. Look at them, support. This is what it's all about: passing it on and making sure that we all become successful in this world where it's enough for everybody to be successful. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been another exciting episode of the Andre the Beast Crayton Show.